I'm going to approach this one a little differently as well, and I really just want to open with this statement. This just became a reality in me a few years ago. How much time I wasted in my walk with God praying instead of talking to the Father. Did you catch that? I wasted so many hours praying when I should have just been talking to Daddy. I petitioned, I confessed, I interceded, I overtook, I undertook, I pulled down, I cast out, I claimed, I named, I confessed, I professed, I clocked it on a stopwatch, I wrote down notes, what I thought I should pray about, what I thought the Lord had said to me. I segmented my prayer off into quarters and half hours and hours. I needed a morning quiet time. I needed a moment when I'd get alone with Him at lunch. I needed an evening quiet time. I needed so many minutes before I could go into the pulpit. I needed to couple that prayer with fasting so that the prayer would be even more powerful, because there'd be less of me involved, more of Him involved. And I spent so much time praying and so little time talking to my dad. I was petitioning a distant master. I was talking to a Lord somewhere over in the glory land. I was hoping that somehow I would do enough that He would pull us closer together and kill that chasm, that gap, that separation that obviously existed between sinful-minded Paul and holy-minded God. And how can we bridge that gap, and what can we do? So I read the prayer manuals and the prayer books and watched the prayer people and tried to understand how other people prayed and began to investigate in the Word. What I found as I've journeyed is I'm not alone. There's a lot of us that are working so hard at prayer. In fact, it's such hard work, many have stopped altogether. They've just stopped even trying because they don't feel very successful in it. And we've equated so much of success in prayer with how we feel anyway. Since I don't really feel anything, this thing probably isn't working. And I've tried to pray until I can feel it, and that wears me out. And if we were honest and went around and raised hands, we would say, how many of you have realized that the longer your eyes are closed in prayer, the closer you get to falling asleep? And that laughter lets me know that, yep, more than once. Right smack dab in the middle of grabbing hold of the horns of the altar, you were gone. It had nothing to do with being slain in the Spirit or going out in the Holy Ghost. It had to do with eyes closed too long, nothing happening. Natural progression is you're going to fall asleep. And as I used to tell the people in our church, if you come into this church and you fall asleep while I'm preaching, sleep on. I said, because if I am the one time in your life you can rest and fall asleep, then I count it a great honor that I have put you in such a place of peace and compassion that you just slip out into the unconscious and enjoy yourself. Then God bless you in that sleep. May it be, by God's grace, the greatest sleep you've had all week long. And our church grew, and I figured out at one point that it was growing because people had decided that this was the best place they could take a nap. It was calm and peaceful. They could come together and enjoy just resting. Now, being a little humorous, I did actually say that, and I think some people took advantage of it as well. And I'll say it to you again today. If during the course of this sermon you find your eyes getting heavy and you fall asleep, just consider that the Holy Ghost putting a divine rest over you to say, just enjoy yourself. This is the safest place to fall asleep in the world. Just enjoy it. I won't condemn you, shout at you, scream at you, yell at you. If my volume goes up and that wakes you up, for that I apologize in advance. So I began to have a problem with that. So something's not right. I want to know how to pray. And I discovered that so did the disciples. In fact, the disciples walked with Jesus every day. They talked with Jesus every day. They watched Him heal the sick. They watched Him raise the dead. He pulled some serious tricks. The dude walked on water. He defied gravity and walked on water. Have you ever tried that? I have. It does not, to this point, has never yet worked for me. If it's worked for you, let me know. This is amazing, and yet they never asked Jesus, show us how to raise the dead, show us how to heal the sick, show us how to walk on water. Jesus is he had to be the greatest public preacher. He stumps learned men, scribes and Pharisees. He stumps them with His theology, with His wisdom, with His rebuttal. And yet the disciples never pull him off to the side and say, teach us how to do that. That looks awesome. I love how you silence Caiaphas. Teach me how to silence Caiaphas. But they do pull him off to the side and say, Lord, teach us how to pray. Which tells me that Jesus must have been a master communicator with his Father. There was something about the way he prayed that they couldn't figure out. That seems so simple. Prayer should have been the thing that looked obvious, because all you had to do was listen, right? Just watch Jesus and then listen and then just copycat it. I mean, that's how I thought prayer was anyway. I mean, listen to if people pray eloquently, if they use these words, learn how to use those words. If they're stringing together certain verses, string together those verses. And yet, there was something about it that was so unique, they realized they weren't able to copy it. They weren't able to do what he did. And maybe it's because for Jesus, prayer had been so silent. Prayer had been so internal. I personally believe it was because Jesus didn't pray out loud very often. And I think that's one of the things that's actually stunted our prayer development in the church, is that we get infatuated with people praying out loud. And I've heard people say, I can't pray like that. I heard brother so-and-so pray, I can't pray like that. I go, what do you mean you can't pray like that? It's communication. You don't have to say those words. So Jesus sort of downplayed public prayer. Remember that? He said the Pharisees like to pray in public places where people can hear them pray. So I think Jesus' prayer life was so silent that they wondered if it even existed. Because Jesus, I think, took the Old Testament motif of meditation. The Old Testament meditation is to pray. And you literally listen more than you talk. You spend time listening to the Father more than you talk to the Father. So I think there were big blocks where Jesus was just sitting there, staring into space, not saying anything. Maybe every now and then his lips would move. He'd talk to his Father. Maybe every now and then his eyes would close. The disciples watched from afar and went, I don't know what he's doing, but I want to learn that.